This is the DIY Artist Route Podcast, a journey into what it takes to take your music and your creative project to the right people. Build your tribe of SuperFans and growth farm for real, lasting success. Hi, I'm D. Grant Smith. Thanks for joining me. Today we are joined by a living legend, the man who birthed the idea of 1,000 SuperFans for Success, Kevin Kelly. He's the founding editor of Wired magazine, and he's also been a writer, photographer, conservationist, and student of Asian and digital culture. His new book is titled The Inevitable, looking at the deep trends in the next 20 years that will shape your life. We'll talk specifics on the concept of the superfan, building that part of your audience, and the power of vision in 1 minute. First, today's DIY Artist Route Podcast is brought to you by Bandzoogle. Built for musicians by musicians, Bandzoogle makes it easy to build a beautiful website for your music. Their step-by-step system will get you online in minutes. Choose from hundreds of mobile-friendly themes, then customize your design with Bandzoogle's easy point-and-click editor. Plus, all the features you need for a professional website are already built in. You can sell your music and merch commission-free right on your website, build your fan list, and send professional newsletters using the mailing list tool. Pull in content from all of your online services, including Twitter, Instagram, and SoundCloud. Get live support from their musician-friendly team 7 days a week. Plans start at just $10 a month, including free registration of your own custom domain. Go to bandzoogle.com and try it for free for 30 days and use the promo code DIYPOD to get 15% off the first year of any Bandzoogle subscription. My friend, it is an honor to share the insights into growth on the journey towards success. It's also an honor to get to speak with someone who has helped shape much of my philosophies on what that growth actually looks like. Kevin Kelly is going to provide some fantastic insights into making both growth and success very real for you and for me today. Are you ready to get started? Good. Lace up those shoes and let's hit the DIY artist route. Kevin, thank you so much for being with us.
I'm really privileged. Thanks for having me.
Your work is incredibly inspiring and in some ways still being dissected years after you wrote it. And I'm, of course, referring primarily to your 1,000 True Fans article that is also posted on your website. And like I said, it's the basis for a lot of the guiding principles that I talk about and several people in my circles of music and art. I'm curious about the origin of how you got to that place. Where and how did you first arrive at this discovery of success via the true superfan?
I had been talking about the idea and inquiring about the idea for several years before I wrote it. So I don't remember when the notion first surfaced, but there was some dawning awareness, in the 2000s somewhere, that hey, you don't need a million fans these days if you had direct contact with your fans. And so I began to actually ask people in the music business, primarily in the beginning, whether they had any evidence of people who were trying to do this. And this part was very unformed in my mind. I was just sort of inquiring about people who had built a business around direct contact with their fans. And so in the beginning, it was just sort of this vague sense that, it seems like if you had direct contact with your fans, you wouldn't need that many. And so I began to just noodle around that, and then, and I was thinking, well, if you did have that contact, could you raise money? Could you get money from them as well? I mean, how would you get money? How much money would you get? And so it was sort of more of like a research project than anything else. And then after kind of inquiring around it, there was not very much evidence for it. I began then to just, back of the envelope calculate some numbers just to see if I could approximate that, and then once I had this sort of $100 per true fan, and then you just need 1,000 of them, and then I kind of started to write things down and make a hypothesis. Then I started doing more real research, looking around and asking people. I think I sent it around to some people. Said, "Does this make sense? Do you know anybody who's doing this?" And there was a couple little bits, and other people like Jaron Lanier, who was a friend. He was saying he was interested in the economics. He was saying, "Well, I know people, but they've all arrived there from having deals with publishers or studios first, and then they kind of left them. But there's nobody who did it from the bottom up native that he knew about." I eventually did find some. So it was a research project that was many, many years in the origin. And then I finally put it out. I just wrote it up because it seemed like that would be the best way to kind of continue the research. So the best way to get information on the internet is not to ask someone, is to say something that you know is wrong and have people correct you. And so that's sort of what I did. Well, I'll just put this down, and then if I'm wrong, people will let me know. And basically, there were some other people saying, "Well, you don't know about this guy who is doing this." And then I actually ran some some contrary views of people who were trying to do that and having difficulty doing it. So that was one of the follow-up. So that's sort of it was sort of a very vague notion that took a long time to kind of come, and then I kind of put it out very tentatively. And even today, I still think it's an approximation more than anything else. It's almost aspirational rather than a mandate. And so I'm really glad that people have really been inspired by it. And that was sort of the point. The numbers are actually not as critical as the general thesis that the numbers that you need are not really huge. They're actually something that's human scale. I mean, individual scale. 1,000, whether it's 1,000 or 2,000 or 5,000 or even 10,000, those are kind of numbers that you could relate to in some senses, and so that's the whole point.
Well, for me, I work in radio primarily. Hosting a syndicated radio show, and there's a lot of people that submit music to the show, and in the process of all that, I've had the opportunity to work with musicians and helping them grow their audience. And there's this, in my belief, mistaken notion that to be successful and to have something that makes you successful, you have to either go viral or you have to do something in the millions sense.
Right.
And
that's wrong.
That's wrong.
That's incorrect, right?
So you talk about this in terms of focusing instead on the long tail, and I'd like for you to describe what that means.
So long tail was the articulation of another Wired editor who followed me, Chris Anderson. I think it was an observation originally either in Amazon or Netflix where they did a calculation and said that the total sum of sales, let's say, at the far end of the sales curve was greater than all the sales of the best sellers. So there's a normal distribution curve for almost any product where the best sellers are these giant, headlands, or this giant mountain of sales, and the number per unit, say, and then it kind of curves down and it drifts off to this very low amount, which goes on and on and on. So while there may be 10 items that sell 1 million, there'll be 1 million items that sell less than 10, and that is called the long tail because it encompasses almost all products. You may sell 1 or 2 a year, say, and there'll be some who sell none. But that what he's saying that in aggregate, the total of the long tail exceeds all the bestsellers, and so this is a little bit complicated because in fact that's good news, but that's mostly just good news for the aggregators. It doesn't. In other words, like the Netflix and the Amazon, which was his point, which they can make more money by selling all the little guys than they can by trying to just sell the big bestsellers, which is what the chains, like the bookstore chains and some of the labels are trying to do. They're just going to stock just the bestsellers. And so it's not necessarily good news for the curators because it doesn't really increase your sales very much. But it is good news for the creators in the sense that at least Amazon or these aggregates like Netflix aggregators will give you some attention. They'll give you some exposure because it's in their benefit to make sure that these long tail items are as easy to find as a bestseller. And that's sort of the one thing to take away from the long tail idea, which is that your little creation is only one click away from the bestsellers. And so in order to make the long tail usable to Netflix or Amazon, they have to make it easy to find those things. And so that findability and discoverability has been improved many, many thousandfold since then. And so it's easier to find those things. And so for the creators, while they're not necessarily ever going to have really huge sales, at least these 1,000 true fan clubs or these little communities can find you. And so that discoverability is the thing that has changed. And so that whereas you're not necessarily going to sell more, you will be able to your true fan will be able to find you. And that's the big news there.
The true fan, the super fan, can be sometimes elusive for an artist to understand and be able to describe. And some musicians, many of them, struggle to make the connection with the people who are the most passionate about who they are and what they do. I'm curious, from your perspective, for artists who are just starting out, how do you engage with your first diehard fan who is maybe on the verge of the level of fandom from being just kind of on the fringe to becoming a true fan without scaring them off?
That's a really great question, and I don't really have a very good answer for that. I'm going to retreat to the kind of thing I said originally. My take on the 1,000 True Fans did not come out of my experience with fandom. It was a theoretical proposition. It was almost a mathematical proposition. Mm-hmm. It was saying, according to everything that I have seen, this should work. It wasn't like, oh, I have been doing this and I have built up my 1,000 True Fans and here's my experience. And therefore I can answer like, well, how did I do it? Because that's not how I came to it. I came to it from a theoretical background, just saying in theory this should work. And then I went out to see if there's others who had done it. So I didn't, I'm sort of the case of like Jaron. I had been, I was originally published by New York publishers and magazines and stuff. And I did eventually do a Kickstarter, and I've done several very, very successful best-selling books like Cool Tools, and with just self-publishing and True Fans. But I got there I got my fans kind of like the old-fashioned way through old, established media. So I didn't build up that way. That's not my experience. So I really can't answer that.
Well, I'm glad you talk about the old-fashioned way. I'm more of an old soul in the way that I go about doing things and thinking about things. So indulge me for a moment if you don't mind, Kevin. Tell me about these old-fashioned ways about how you have gone about growing the audience that you have.
Well, what I mean is that I piggybacked on, established publishers like Penguin, Random House, and others to do the books that I first began doing. And they were doing the marketing. Basically, the old school was like, I'm the creator. I'll create the product. The publisher will give me an advance. I give them the product. They process it, design it, and then they do the marketing through their distribution. I mean, that was old school. And so, it was a very asymmetrical. I was very dependent on them. I didn't have any contact. I had no idea who was reading my books. I would occasionally. I did a very different. I thought it was an insane idea at the time. In my very first book, I put my email address in, which at that time nobody even had email addresses. They didn't even know what that was. But I put my email address in my book, and I hoped that people would write. But very few did, because very few people had emails at the time. And so, by and large, I didn't have a lot of contact with my fans in the beginning, but I was doing things like I just said. I put my email in, so I slowly accumulated, some contact with people. And my second book, I believe, I did send an email out when the book was released. I mean, that was sort of that was in 1998. And so that was the extent of the social media at that time. Was I had an email, I had a bunch of emails, and I sent a notice saying, "Hey, I have a new book out, and you might be interested in it." And that was what one did. And I'm talking about in the thousands, maybe. I'm not sure. There's probably less than 1,000 emails. And so, then my third book, I began a blog. I began blogging. The Cool Tools was a blog that I began in 2003. Actually, it was a newsletter first. I had another set of email addresses. I sent a newsletter every week. I started off to my friends. My friends said, "Can I add my friend?" I said, "Sure." So it was by word of mouth, and started doing that. And then Mark Freudenfelder, who was one of the first bloggers, told me about blogs, and I started to put this on the blog. And we had from the very beginning, the blog made money. I had Google AdSense, and so I accumulated an audience there. But I didn't know who they were. I didn't have their emails. It was just, they were just an audience that came and went. That grew over time, and that was sort of that became my main audience for basically 2003 to almost 2013. That was the heyday of blogging, and that was where I would call my native audience was. I was then writing my third. I mean, it depends how you count the books. The third book that I wrote by myself. And when Twitter and all this Facebook came along, I was too busy writing the book, and I was way behind, like years behind. And I registered, but wasn't active. And so I was very slow to social media. And I'm not necessarily a very good example of someone who does it smartly. I think I do it reluctantly. I'm not a chatty person, so this last book, I did a Kickstarter for a graphic novel, which we worked on for 11 years. I did a self-published Cool Tools book, which was an Amazon bestseller, and that was kind of going out to the blogs. I had more than one blog by that time, for letting people know. This last book, which I just released this week that we're kind of talking about, or 2 weeks ago, The Inevitable, I actually did use more social media, and there I just recently I tweeted the entire book, by that, I mean I took one sentence from every page of the book and we tweeted that out 2 a day for many, many, many months. And so basically, I tweeted the whole book, and that was, I think, very effective. So that's sort of the short of it, is in kind of a haphazard, not very, not very engineered, not very planned approach of just sort of, using the tools at hand when it seemed like it was a good idea, and not using all of them that were available simply because I'm lazy.
Well, I appreciate that honesty, man. That's really cool. I do want to ask you about your book. I want to, in a sense, kind of tie in. I recently published a book as well that is specifically for musicians and radio airplay, but the heart and soul of it is about communication and relationship building. And a lot of the things that you're talking about, having theoretically discussed and analyzed and put out there, waiting for somebody to tell you that you're wrong, and more and more people, I believe, are not telling you that you're wrong, but saying, this is the truth. And there are actually quite a few artists that I know and work with that have built their mantra and their model on 1,000 True Fans. But the connection point with that and the retention of those people has everything to do with how we build those relationships. And what I see technology, and especially social media, has done is it's in a lot of ways disconnected our ability to actually build one-to-one relationships with people, because it's so easy to message somebody that you don't know that lives across the country or across the ocean. And we forget about some of the same social norms and social connection rules. And since your book is talking about things that are reshaping our lives via technology, is the communication and connection part of the way that we socially connect with each other and interact and communicate with each other, what is that you see in the next 30 years?
Yeah, that's a good question. So in general, the book is called The Inevitable, because it's about these very long-term, high-level forces, leanings in technology that derive from the very nature of the bits and circuits and wires that tend to make these recurring patterns that give it a sense of leaning in certain directions, almost like gravity kind of pulling down the raindrop water droplets in a valley, in which the specific pathway of that droplet is unpredictable. You can't predict at all, but the general direction downward is inevitable. And that's kind of what I'm doing with the book, is I'm looking at these large-scale trends that are inevitable, like gravity, but the particulars of how they're manifest are completely unpredictable. So, like, I would say the internet was inevitable, but Twitter was not. And so I don't talk about the particulars, because I think those are completely unpredictable, and also we have a lot of control over and to change, and they matter to us. So what kind of internet we have? The internet was inevitable, but the kind of internet, whether it's international or national, open or closed, is something that is not inevitable, and something we care about and have and can control. So the particular forms of communication, like telephones are inevitable, but the iPhone wasn't. So telephony and is one of those kinds of things that will happen no matter what. And I think coming in front of us, I talk about the fact that the ways that we have been sharing, collaborating, coordinating, cooperating, has been very impressive. But we've just begun those. I think that's one of the things ahead is this ability to keep increasing the range and scale and scope and speed these of ways in which collaborate, so that we'll be able to, like Facebook has begun. It's like to have collaboration at the scale of 1 billion people in real time doing things together, working on something that is maybe take years to do. All that kind of collaboration was simply not possible before. So one thing that we're coming up is this new scale, which simply wasn't before. But going back to your question of like, well, what about the kind of tools that might facilitate a deepening of relationships with a small group of people, rather than just sort of the expansion of scale? And there, I think there'll still be small advances in ways to do that. But I think, to me, one of the exciting new communication modes is going to be virtual reality, where you are capturing your body language and body movement. So it's more than just your kind of minds that are connected. It's like your entire body, your body language, your whole body, what you do, and also the fact that when we receive this, when we are in VR, we're experiencing it in a very different way than we are when we sit in front of a screen. When we sit in front of a screen, it's sort of like we are observing things. We are knowing things. It works, or kind of the front of our brain is working. But when you're in VR, that sense of presence, of being present, is being generated at a different, much more primitive, lower part of your brain, that is being tricked into believing that this thing is there, that this person is there. And because of that, you have when you leave a VR world, you recollect it not as having seen things, but having experienced things. And so I talk about this shift from an internet of knowledge and information to an internet of experiences. And I think that is going to be both a huge opportunity and a huge challenge, as well as a new way to kind of deepen, so to speak, the type of communication that we're doing. So there'll be a much more of an emotional overlay, an experiential overlay, which is going to be both challenging in terms of generating new problems and many new opportunities as well. And so that's something that's very soon. And I think for the people trying to go the kind of 1,000 true fan route, virtual reality will be another layer in which they can use to deepen the kind of relationships that they have with their super fans. And that's a new opportunity. I don't know if we don't know, too early to say how that's going to assist or facilitate or encourage people who are, trying to make it a go as a lifestyle. But I suspect that it has great potential.
The experiential and emotional overlay that you're talking about is, in a lot of ways, it's already there. Because getting into what you mentioned a minute ago about how you crowdfunded some of the projects that you've done, and there are ongoing crowdfunding styled ways to cultivate Patreon is essentially built on the 1,000 true fan doctrine that you have. So, and I should have mentioned that a minute ago. In terms of like looking for examples of it, every Patreon account is an example of it. But it's all about building that experience as a creator. Instead of just creating a product that you put out for sale, it's about creating an experience that people can dive into. And I'm kind of interested in the virtual reality stuff, but I want to ask kind of a deeper question, because you've mentioned a minute ago about doing things in an old school fashion and being a little bit slow to some of this digital stuff. Do you feel that there is a need for us as individuals moving forward in a almost all digital landscape to somewhat disconnect from the digital worlds and make a conscious effort to connect with people regularly in a face-to-face setting so that we don't really lose our connection with being a human and having that one-to-one interaction?
Absolutely. That was one of the big surprises that we had when we first started The Well in 1984, which was to later become the first public access to the internet. Before that time, the internet was only accessible if you worked in a corporation or for a university. So we engineered this this kind of a glorified bulletin board that was accessible to anybody in the country and then basically in the world that had a modem, and it was also this place where not just kind of academics could internet, but there was school teachers, organic farmers, a lot of journalists, and kind of ordinary people who were fans of the Whole Earth Catalog at that time. And they came together, and one of the first things that just really surprised us, because there was these very intense, it was a virtual community, and there was very intense online relationships, and it was at that time so thrilling and addictive in a certain sense, meeting people that you had not seen who were in different parts of the world who shared some of your very specific interests. And this is all very common now, but at that time it was really amazing. But one of the things that surprised us was that there was a call from every little corner of the Well, which is what it was called, to meet face to face. The more people met online and spent time, the more compelled they were to meet face to face. And I think that continues, and that's true now. And it's in some ways you could say, well, it's kind of a compensation for meeting online, but in another way, it's also just kind of a reward in a certain sense, in that you kind of crave the additional bandwidth, crave the additional level of experience that you can get face to face. So it's like the ultimate VR system that is completely persuasive. It's got all this extravagant detail and other things, and so I think that. Yes, this is true for myself, that this is why, like the TED conference, which you pay thousands and thousands of dollars, or other conferences like that, to go meet, why that has sort of risen alongside of the online communities, there's a correspondence with the value that we place on meeting people, or our tribe, so to speak, face to face, and doing all this other face to face stuff. And so I think you're right that in a kind of a complete, if you do a complete map of what you want to do, that a face to face is absolutely part of it. And most of the media companies today all have conferences as part of their spectrum of how they're serving their audience. They have, they've got their online stuff, they've got their videos, they've got a conference, because face-to-face is part of that.
Your book, The Inevitable, and your other books are available at kk.org/books. Where else can people go to get connected to you?
Yeah, I have my website, which is got a lot of stuff on it at kk.org, my initials.org. I do some irregular tweeting at Kevin 2 Kelly. I'm not very active on the other ones. I used to be very active on Google Plus, which I love because of the high quality of the replies, but people aren't going there so much. There's a little core group that I still attend to.
So So your SuperFans are on Google Plus.
I was a super fan.
See.
It was the other way around. There were some people that I was following who were prolific, and I would comment and they would comment back. I'm not so sure that there were super fans. It was a more intelligent conversation that rewarded long form and not just people saying dumb things. And so so it was a more of intelligent. The super fans, I suspect, were probably on my blog, and my email has been public for 30 years, and I respond to every legitimate email that's sent to me, and have for 30 years. And so I'm old school in that sense. That
me too. Me too.
That I have a one-to-one correspondence with a lot of people. Not that I'm necessarily will say very much. I may say a sentence, but I will respond.
Well, Kevin, it's been a privilege to talk to you and connect with a fellow like-minded person and a founding father of something that I've built my entire platform on. Thank you so much for being with us here on this podcast and for just being a part of the journey, man. Thank you.
I really appreciate the honor of being here, and I actually would look forward to hearing more about what you've been learning about the true fan, super fan, because I'm by no means an expert. I mean, I might have initiated the kind of seed, but it's grown way beyond that. There are a lot of people who have experience, and someday I really should go back and do a follow-up report on what we now know. And it sounds like you've been thinking about that. So I would welcome another conversation with you sometime in the future.
Absolutely. And I would gladly be a part of or offer my insight and experiences and everything with your follow-up work. That'd be wonderful.
Well, thanks again.
Kevin Kelly, writer, editor, author, and philosopher. Let's add inspirational person to that list too. Get more on Kevin and his new book, The Inevitable, at kk.org. You can also follow him on Twitter at Kevin2Kelly. The concept of reaching and growing a particular group of your audience base, let's call them what they are, superfans, is a part of the growth farming framework detailed in my book, The DIY Musician's Radio Handbook. You can get your paperback copy right now at dgrantsmith.com/books, and the Kindle version is available at amazon.com. And I've got an audiobook coming out soon. Also inside the handbook is a big discount to my online course that shows you how to get indie radio, blog, and media coverage. Jump into the handbook for a massive discount on the course. It's in the introduction section. Our theme song is called Tryin', and it comes from my buddy Timothy Palmer's Half Boy EP. As you know, Timothy is a fantastic author. He has a ton of heart and a really, really powerful message to his songwriting. We just talked about superfans, and your superfans are a specific group of your audience base, people that are the most passionate about who you are. I want you to think about that when you think about this podcast episode. Think about the people in your life that are the most important to you, and go share this podcast episode with them. Tell them how this episode impacted you, and send them to whatever platform it is that you're listening to this right now. If that's iTunes, Stitcher, Spreaker, my website, anywhere, share with them the link. And give them your love too. As always, growth farming is all about spreading love, so do that. Thanks for joining me once again, and for being a part of this journey. I've got more in store for you and more to share with you on my website, dgrantsmith.com. Tons of tips, insights into building your work, growing your superfan audience, and becoming a more whole human being. I live to help you grow and see you win. That is what growth farming is all about. We'll pick up next time with a new journeyman to teach us more about how to grow as artists and creative entrepreneurs. Be uncommon this week, my friend, and keep growth farming. I'm D. Grant Smith. I'll see you next time right here on the DIY Artist Route.